I was driving home from the estate attorney's office in downtown Atlanta, feeling lighter than I had felt in years. My Aunt Lorraine had passed 3 months back, and I'd just learned she left me 2 rental properties in Memphis, a lake house on Lake Lanier, and close to $200,000 in savings. I couldn't wait to tell my wife, but the second I walked through the front door of our Stone Mountain home, I heard her voice drifting from the kitchen talking with our son. I was about to call out, but something stopped me cold. What I heard next froze my blood. Let me back up and start from the beginning. The phone call came. On a gray Tuesday afternoon in early March, I was in my home office going over some consulting work I'd picked up since retiring from my accounting firm 2 years prior. The number was unfamiliar, a 404 area code. Good afternoon. Am I speaking with Mr. Marcus Johnson? Yes, this is Marcus. My name is Jasmine Carter. I'm an estate attorney with Carter and Associates. I'm calling about the estate of your aunt, Lorraine Elizabeth Johnson. You're listed as the sole beneficiary in her will. I leaned back in my chair, confused. My aunt had passed in December, right after Christmas. The funeral had been small, just me, a handful of neighbors from her building, and a couple of her old friends from the community center where she volunteered. My wife hadn't even bothered to show up, claiming she had a migraine. I'm sorry, there must be some kind of mistake. My aunt lived in a modest apartment in East Point. She was on a fixed pension. She didn't have anything to leave behind. Mr. Johnson, I understand your surprise. Many of our clients' families react the same way. However, I can assure you there are substantial assets involved. I'd prefer to discuss the details in person. Could you come to our office this week? Of course. I can come tomorrow. Excellent. 2 o'clock. I hung up and stared at the wall. My Aunt Lorraine had been the only family I had left after my parents passed. She never married, never had children. She'd worked as a secretary at a small manufacturing plant for 40 years, retiring on a modest pension. She lived simply, always wearing the same few outfits, always bringing her own lunch when we'd meet for coffee. What could she possibly have left me? The next day, I drove downtown to a sleek office tower on Peachtree Street. The law firm was on the 12th floor, all glass and polished mahogany. Jasmine Carter was a woman in her early 50s, professional and warm. Mr. Johnson, please have a seat. I'll try to explain everything clearly. She opened a thick folder and began laying documents across the desk. Your aunt came to me 5 years ago to draft her will. She was very specific about her wishes. She wanted everything to go to you, and only you. Everything? But she had nothing. Jasmine smiled gently. That's what she wanted everyone to believe. Your aunt was what we call a stealth millionaire. She began investing in real estate in the early 1980s, when prices in the greater Atlanta area were still affordable. She bought her first rental property in Memphis in 1983 for $58,000. She slid a property deed across the desk. I stared at it. That property is now worth approximately $435,000. She owns a second rental property in the same neighborhood. Purchased in 1992. Current value is roughly $390,000. I couldn't speak. Additionally, she purchased a lake house on Lake Lanier in 1996. The property includes waterfront access and a 3-bedroom cabin. Conservative estimate is $625,000, though waterfront properties in that area often sell for more. This is impossible, I whispered. There's also a savings account with $198,000, accumulated for rental income over the decades. She lived off her pension and let the rental income compound. I did the math in my head. Nearly $1.6 million in assets. Why didn't she ever tell me? Jasmine reached into her folder and pulled out a sealed envelope. On the front, In my aunt's shaky handwriting, it read, "For Marcus open after you learn the truth. She asked me to give you this. She said you'd understand once you read it." I took the envelope with trembling hands. The paper was thick, cream-colored, the kind my aunt always used for important letters. "Would you like some privacy?" Jasmine asked. "Please." She stepped out, closing the door softly behind her. I tore open the envelope and unfolded the pages inside. "My dearest Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've just discovered my little secret. I imagine you're shocked. Good. That means I kept it hidden well. You're wondering why I lived the way I did, penny pinching, wearing old clothes, eating simple meals. The truth is, I enjoyed that life. I never needed much. But more importantly, I didn't want anyone to know what I had. Money changes people, Marcus. It brings out their true nature, and often that nature is ugly. I watched you over the years. I saw you marry young, full of hope. I saw you work hard, provide for your family, sacrifice your own dreams to keep everyone else comfortable. And I saw how they treated you in return. Your wife never liked me. She thought I was a burden, an embarrassing old aunt with nothing to offer. She stopped coming to our lunches years ago. She rolled her eyes when you mentioned visiting me. She didn't even come to my funeral, did she? I know things, Marcus. I know she controls the money in your household, even though you earned most of it. I know your son only calls when he needs something. I know your daughter-in-law looks at you like your furniture. I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you because I want you to see clearly. This inheritance is not just money and property. It is your freedom. Use it wisely, but listen carefully to what I'm about to say. When people find out about this inheritance, they will change. The ones who ignored you will suddenly become attentive. The ones who dismissed you will become interested. Watch them. Listen to them. Let them show you who they really are before you make any decisions. Don't announce this inheritance right away. Go home, act normal, and observe. You might be surprised by what you discover. I believe in you, Marcus. You're a good man, perhaps too good for your own sake. It's time to start living for yourself. With all my love, Aunt Lorraine. I sat in that office for a long time, reading the letter twice, 3 times. My aunt had always been perceptive, but I dismissed her comments about my wife as the grumblings of an old woman who didn't understand modern marriages. Now I wasn't so sure. I finished the paperwork with Jasmine, signed where she indicated, and left the office with copies of everything in a manila folder. The originals would be kept in the firm's safe until I decided what to do. On the drive home, I thought about what my aunt had written. Don't announce this inheritance right away. It seemed paranoid. My wife and I had been married for 37 years. Surely I could trust her. But something made me hesitate. Call it intuition, call it, my aunt's warning echoing in my mind. When I pulled into the driveway of our house, I decided to wait. Just for a day or two. Just to see. I walked in the front door and called out, "I'm home." My wife came out of the kitchen, barely glancing at me. "Where were you?" "Had to run some errands downtown. Dinner's at 6. She turned and walked back to the kitchen. That was it. No curiosity about where I'd been or what I'd done. In 37 years of marriage, she'd stopped being curious about me a long time ago. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to my wife, listening to her steady breathing, thinking about my aunt's words. Money changes people. It brings out their true nature. What was my wife's true nature? I thought I knew, but suddenly I wasn't certain. The next few days, I observed. I paid attention to small things I'd ignored for years. How my wife never asked about my day. How she made decisions about the house, the finances, our social calendar without consulting me. How she spoke to me like I was an employee rather than a partner. And then there was the matter of the household finances. I'd handled the money early in our marriage, but somewhere along the way, my wife had taken over. She said I was too busy with work, that she'd manage things. I was grateful at the time. Now I started to wonder. I checked our joint accounts online. The balances were reasonable. Nothing alarming. But then I noticed transfers I didn't recognize. Small amounts, $200 here, $300 there, going to an account I'd never seen before. When I asked my wife about it, she waved her hand dismissively. That's for household expenses. I keep a separate account for groceries and such. It's easier to track. It sounded reasonable, but something felt wrong. A week passed. I said nothing about the inheritance. And then my son came to visit. My son, Deandra, was 42, a middle manager at a telecommunications company. He lived in Decatur with his wife and 2 children. He visited maybe twice a year, usually when he needed something. He showed up on a Saturday afternoon, alone. "Dad, got a minute?" We sat in the living room. My wife was out shopping. "What's on your mind?" He fidgeted, avoiding my eyes. "Look, I heard about Aunt Lorraine." I kept my face neutral. "What about her?" "I heard she might have left you something." "Is that true?" "Interesting." "How did he know?" "I hadn't told anyone." "Where'd you hear that?" "Mom mentioned it. She said you'd been to see some lawyer downtown." My wife had noticed my trip after all, and she'd told our son. "I've been handling some paperwork related to your aunt's estate," I said carefully. "There are always things to sort out when someone passes." Right. But is there, anything substantial?" "Why do you ask?" He leaned forward. "Dad, I'll be honest with you. Things have been tight lately. The company's talking about layoffs, and my mortgage is killing me. If there's any inheritance, I could really use some help." I looked at my son, really looked at him. When had he become this person? When had "hello, how are you" turned into "what can you give me"? "I'm still sorting through the details," I said. "When I know more, we'll talk." He left an hour later, disappointed but trying to hide it. I sat alone in the living room, thinking about my aunt's letter. Let them show you who they really are. 3 weeks after my visit to the lawyer's office, I returned to finalize some paperwork and sign additional documents. Everything was nearly complete. The properties were being transferred to my name. The bank accounts were being consolidated. I drove home, feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe my wife and son were just concerned, just curious. Maybe I'd been unfair to them. I parked in the driveway and walked to the front door. It was slightly ajar, unusual for my wife, who was obsessive about security. I pushed it open quietly and stepped inside. Voices were coming from the kitchen. My wife and my son. I was about to announce myself when I heard my son say, "So how much are we talking about?" I froze. "Keep your voice down," my wife hissed. "The properties alone are worth over $1 million. Plus there's cash, maybe $200,000. How do you know all this?" I called Lorraine's building manager, pretended to be settling her affairs. He mentioned the lawyer's name. Then I called the lawyer's office, said I was Marcus's assistant following up on the estate. The receptionist let slip enough details. My stomach dropped. My wife had been investigating behind my back. "So what's the plan?" My son asked. "We need to move carefully. Your father's not stupid. If we push too hard, he'll get suspicious. He's already suspicious. He barely told me anything when I asked." "That's because you were too obvious. Let me handle this." There was a pause. I heard someone pour liquid into a glass. "Here's what we do," my wife continued. "I'll work on him slowly. Talk about how we should use this money for the family. Mention that it would be selfish to keep it all to himself when his son is struggling. What if he doesn't go for it? Then we apply pressure. I'll bring up the divorce option. After 37 years, I'm entitled to half of everything, including any inheritance, if it gets mixed with our joint assets. Georgia law is on my side. Would you actually divorce him? My wife left a cold sound I'd never heard before. Not if I don't have to. It's easier to stay married and spend his money. But if he tries to keep everything separate, if he tries to cut us out, then yes, I'll take him for everything he's worth. What about me? Deandra asked. Once I have access to the accounts, I'll transfer money to you. We'll say it's for the grandchildren's education. He won't question that. And if he does, then we remind him what a useless, boring man he's become. Honestly, I've been carrying this marriage for 20 years. He sits in his office all day doing nothing. He has no friends. His own relatives are dead. Without me, he'd have no life at all. I stood in the hallway, unable to move. Every word was a knife. The thing is, my wife continued, he's always been weak. He does what he's told because he's afraid of conflict. That's why I married him. He was easy to manage. So we just keep pushing until he gives in? Exactly. And if he somehow grows a spine, we have leverage. I've been keeping records of our finances for years. I can make it look like he's been hiding money, mismanaging our retirement savings. No judge would side with him. Mom, that's brilliant. I've had 37 years to plan for this, sweetheart. I just never thought the opportunity would be this big. I stood there for another minute, listening to them laugh, listening to them toast to their future plans, my future, stolen from me by the two people I'd trusted most. Then I turned, walked silently back to the front door, opened it, closed it loudly, and called out, I'm home. By the time I reached the kitchen, they were sitting at the table, all smiles and innocence. Dad, I didn't know you were coming back so soon. Finished my errands early. What brings you over? Just visiting. Wanted to see how you and Mom were doing. I looked at my wife. She smiled at me, the same smile she'd given me for 37 years. I'd thought it was love. Now I saw it for what it was. Strategy. Dinner's at 6. She said, I'm making your favorite. Looking forward to it. I replied. That night, after my son left and my wife went to bed, I sat in my home office with the door locked. I pulled out my phone and searched for family lawyers who specialized in divorce and asset protection. The next morning, I called the top name on my list. The receptionist said the lawyer could see me Thursday afternoon. Book it, I said. For the next 2 days, I acted completely normal. I ate meals with my wife, watched television with her in the evenings, made small talk about the weather and the neighbors. Inside, I was cataloging everything. Every dismissive comment. Every eye roll. Every moment she treated me like I didn't matter. 30-7 years. I'd given her 37 years of my life, and all along she'd been waiting for an opportunity to take everything I had. Thursday came. I told my wife I was meeting an old colleague for lunch downtown. She barely looked up from her phone. Be back by dinner. The lawyer's office was in a historic building in Midtown Atlanta. Regina Williams was a sharp-eyed woman in her late 50s, gray locks pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a crisp navy suit. Mr. Johnson, tell me everything. I told her. The inheritance. My aunt's letter. The conversation I'd overheard. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. First, the good news. In Georgia, inheritance received during a marriage is generally considered separate property as long as it's kept separate from marital assets. This means you should not deposit any inheritance money into joint accounts, not use it to pay for jointly owned property expenses, and not commingle it with marital funds in any way. What about what my wife said, that she could take half? She's partially right. And that's the concerning part. If you mix inheritance funds with joint assets, the line becomes blurred. Courts can and do include such funds in equalization payments. But if you keep everything separate, maintain clear documentation, and don't use the inheritance to benefit the marriage, you have strong protection. What should I do? First, open new bank accounts in your name, only at a different institution than your current bank. Transfer the inheritance funds there. Second, keep the properties titled solely in your name. Do not add your wife to any deeds. Third, document everything. Every conversation, every request she makes regarding the money, write it down. If possible, record conversations, but be aware that Georgia is a one-party consent state, which means you can legally record conversations you're part of. What if she files for divorce first? Then we fight. But honestly, Mr. Johnson, based on what you've told me, I'd recommend filing first. It puts you in a stronger position. You control the timeline. You control the narrative. I thought about 37 years. About the life I'd built. The sacrifices I'd made. About the woman I'd loved, who apparently never loved me back. Do it, I said. File the paperwork. Are you certain? Divorce is a significant step. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Over the next month, I prepared carefully. I opened accounts at a credit union and had all inheritance funds transferred there. I collected documentation, property deeds, bank statements, the original letter from my aunt. I rented a safety deposit box and stored copies of everything. I also started looking for a new place to live. The Lake Lanier property was too far from Atlanta for everyday life, but one of the Memphis rental properties had recently become vacant. The previous tenant had moved out, and I'd been planning to list it again. Instead, I decided to move in myself. I hired a contractor to refresh the paint and update the kitchen, telling my wife I was making improvements to increase the rental value. Meanwhile, I continued playing the role of the oblivious husband. My wife grew bolder. She started making comments about our inheritance, about how we should invest it. She suggested taking a vacation to the Bahamas, buying a new car, renovating the kitchen. I nodded along, said I'd think about it, changed the subject. My son called more frequently than he had in years. Suddenly, he was interested in my health, my hobbies, my plans for retirement. He invited me to his children's school events, something he'd never done before. Dad, we should spend more time together. You're not getting any younger. I smiled and agreed. I said nothing about the divorce papers sitting in my lawyer's filing cabinet. 6 weeks after that conversation in the kitchen, my wife's patience ran out. We were sitting in the living room after dinner. She muted the television and turned to face me. Marcus, we need to talk about Laurent's estate. What about it? You've been very secretive about the whole thing. I'm your wife. I have a right to know what's going on. The estate is being processed. These things take time. It's been 2 months. Surely you know by now what she left you. I looked at her, keeping my face neutral. Some property. Some money. Nothing extraordinary. How much money? Why does it matter? Her eyes hardened, just for a moment, before she softened them again. Because we're a team, Marcus. Whatever you have, we share. That's what marriage is it? She frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. I'm just tired. Can we discuss this another time? She stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed the remote and unmuted the television. Fine, but we're not done with this conversation. No, I thought. We're not. The next day, I went back to my lawyer's office. Regina had the divorce papers ready. Once you sign these and I file them, your wife will be served within the week. Are you prepared for her reaction? I'm prepared. Do you have somewhere to stay? I'll be moving to my property in Memphis. Good. The less contact you have during this process, the better. I signed the papers. Regina said she'd file them Monday morning. One more thing, I said. My wife mentioned she's been keeping records. Something about making it look like I've been mismanaging our retirement funds. Should I be concerned? Regina's expression sharpened. Do you have any evidence of financial mismanagement on her part? I noticed some unusual transfers from our joint accounts to an account I don't recognize. How much? Thousands of dollars over the past few years. Small amounts, but they add up. That's potentially significant. Can you get documentation? I can try. Do it. If she's been siphoning money without your knowledge, that's relevant to the divorce proceedings. I went home and waited until my wife left for her weekly book club meeting. Then I went through her desk in the spare bedroom something I'd never done in nearly 4 decades of marriage. In the bottom drawer, beneath old magazines and recipe clippings, I found a folder. Inside were bank statements from an account at a credit union I'd never heard of. The balance was just over $47,000. All of it transferred from our joint accounts over the past 8 years. Small amounts, $50 here, $100 there, just like I'd noticed. There were also receipts. Expensive restaurants I'd never been to. A spa weekend in Savannah. A designer handbag that cost $3,200. And at the very bottom, a handwritten note. It was my wife's handwriting. Retirement fund, $892,000. If Marcus dies first, I get everything. If we divorce, I get half plus whatever he inherited. Either way, I win. I photographed everything with my phone and put the folder back exactly as I'd found it. That night, lying in bed next to my wife, I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even betrayal. Just a cold, clear certainty that I was doing the right thing. Monday came. My lawyer filed the papers. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was my wife, and she was screaming, "What is this? What have you done?" "I'm filing for divorce." "You can't do this. After everything I've given you." "Given me? What exactly have you given me?" "My best years, my youth. I stayed with you when I could have done so much better. Then consider this your opportunity to do better. You'll regret this, Marcus. I'll take you for everything. I'll make sure you end up with nothing." "Talk to my lawyer," I said, and hung up. I'd already moved my essential belongings to the Memphis house. I packed a final bag with clothes and toiletries, took one last look around the Stone Mountain house, and drove away. The divorce process took 4 months. My wife hired an aggressive lawyer who tried every tactic imaginable. She claimed I'd been emotionally abusive. She demanded half the inheritance. She accused me of hiding assets. My lawyer countered with the bank statements I'd found, the secret account, the evidence that my wife had been stealing from our joint finances for years. The judge was not impressed. In the end, my wife got half of our joint marital property, which was fair under Georgia law. The house was sold and the proceeds split. Our retirement savings were divided, but the inheritance remained mine. Every dollar, every property, untouched. My son stopped speaking to me after the divorce was finalized. He sent one final email calling me selfish and ungrateful. I didn't respond. My daughter-in-law blocked me on social media. My grandchildren, I learned, were told that Grandpa had abandoned the family. It hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. But when I sat on the porch of my Memphis house, looking out at the quiet street, I realized something. I'd spent 62 years trying to make other people happy, trying to be a good husband, a good father, a good provider. And in the end, none of it mattered to them. I was just a source of money, a means to an end. My aunt had seen it clearly, even when I couldn't. Spring came to Memphis. I repainted the porch, planted a small garden, met my neighbors. They were good people, ordinary people who invited me to barbecues and asked how I was doing. Not because they wanted anything from me, but because that's what neighbors do. In May, I drove up to the Lake Lanier property for the first time since inheriting it. The place was smaller than I remembered from childhood visits, but beautiful in its simplicity. Pine trees surrounded the property. The lake sparkled in the morning sun. A wooden dock stretched into the water. I spent a week there alone with my thoughts. I fixed a loose railing on the deck. I kayaked along the shoreline. I watched the sunset from an Adirondack chair, drinking coffee and listening to the water lap against the shore. On the last night, I took out my aunt's letter and read it again. This inheritance is not just money and property. It is your freedom. She was right. I wasn't happy, not in the way people talk about happiness. The big house, the loving family, the golden retirement. I didn't have those things anymore. Maybe I never really had them, but I was free. Free to wake up in the morning and decide how to spend my day. Free to eat what I wanted, go where I wanted, talk to whom I wanted. Free from the constant grinding obligation to please people who would never be pleased. It wasn't joy. It was something quieter, something more sustainable. It was peace. A year after the divorce, I ran into my wife at a grocery store in Atlanta. I'd driven into the city for a doctor's appointment. She looked older, smaller somehow. When she saw me, her face went through several expressions: surprise, anger, and then something I couldn't identify. Marcus. Hello. We stood in the cereal aisle, neither of us knowing what to say. You look well, she finally managed. Thank you. You too. A pause. I heard you sold the Stone Mountain house, I said. I had to. The maintenance was too expensive on my own. Her voice had an edge to it, as if it were somehow my fault. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? I thought about it honestly. No, I said. I don't think I am. She stared at me. And for the first time in our nearly 4 decades together, I saw something like respect in her eyes. Or maybe it was just surprise that I'd finally grown a spine. Goodbye, Marcus, she said. Goodbye. I watched her walk away, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not regret, not anger, just a calm acceptance that this chapter of my life was closed. I finished my shopping and drove back to Memphis. 2 years have passed since I inherited my Aunt Lorraine's estate. I'm 64 now, living in the Memphis house, spending summers at the Lake Lanier property. The second rental property provides steady income. I've started volunteering at the local community center, something I never had time for when I was trying to be everything to everyone. I teach basic financial literacy to young men in the neighborhood. I share what I've learned, not just about money, but about knowing your worth. I haven't remarried. I'm not looking for anyone. For the first time in my life, I'm comfortable being alone. Last month, I received a letter from my son. He apologized for how he'd behaved. His marriage had fallen apart, he said, and he'd had time to think about things. He wanted to reconnect. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about my aunt's letter about how people show their true colors when they think no one is watching. My son had shown me his colors, and they weren't pretty, but people can change. I'd changed, after all. I wrote back. I said I was willing to talk, but that things would be different from now on. I wouldn't be the compliant father who handed over money whenever he asked. If he wanted a relationship, it would have to be based on respect, not transactions. He hasn't responded yet. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. Either way, I'll be fine. My aunt was right about everything. The money was never the point. The freedom was the point. The chance to finally, at 64, start living life on my own terms. I think about her often. That frugal old woman in her small apartment, quietly building an empire while everyone dismissed her. She saw more clearly than any of us. She understood something that took me 6 decades to learn. You can't buy love, but you can buy freedom. And sometimes, freedom is worth more. I keep her letter in a frame on my desk now. I read the last line every morning. It's time to start living for yourself. That's what I'm doing, Aunt Lorraine. Finally. That's what I'm doing. And you know what? I've learned something else along the way. Sometimes the people we think are holding us together are actually holding us back. Sometimes the women in our lives, our mothers, our aunts, our sisters, they see things we're too afraid to admit. My Aunt Lorraine saw my truth before I could. She gave me more than money. She gave me permission to choose myself. To every woman reading this who's ever been dismissed, underestimated, or called difficult for speaking truth, you're probably right. Keep speaking. Keep seeing clearly. The world needs your wisdom, even when it pretends it doesn't. And to every man who's been living small to keep others comfortable, it's never too late. Your life is yours. Your choices are yours. Your freedom is yours. I'm not saying my ex-wife was wrong for wanting security. I'm not saying she didn't deserve a partner who showed up fully. Maybe I didn't. Maybe we both failed each other in ways I still can't see. But what I know now is this. You can't build a life on lies. And you can't love someone who only sees you as a resource. The inheritance gave me options. But the real gift? It gave me clarity. I sit on my porch in Memphis now, watching the neighbors walk by, and I feel something I haven't felt in decades. Contentment. Not happiness, not yet, but contentment. The quiet knowledge that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Aunt Lorraine knew. She always knew. And now, so do I. Thank you for being here and letting me share my story. If it touched you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment telling me what city and state you're watching from. I love knowing where you all are. If you want to support me even more, there's a donation link in the description. I share real-life stories like this every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular videos will appear on your screen. Choose whichever one calls to you. Until next time, remember, your story isn't over just because someone tried to write the ending without you.